The first thing I heard when I opened my front door was not, "Welcome home." It was my mother, in-law's voice drifting from my living room, sharp and disgusted, like she was talking about garbage left out in the summer heat. "Has that man finally stopped scrubbing? I cannot stand how this whole room smells right now." For 1 second, I thought I had walked into the wrong house. Then I saw my father on his knees. My suitcase slipped from my hand and hit the floor with a heavy thud, but nobody noticed at first because they were too busy watching him clean. My father, Norman Walker, 67 years old with hands rough from a lifetime of farming in Nebraska, was kneeling on my polished hardwood floor with a faded kitchen rag in his trembling fist. A basket had fallen beside him. The lid was on its side. Thick beef stew had spilled across the floor in a brown river, mixed with broken eggs, crushed tortillas, and the sticky shine of his homemade peach preserves. The jar had shattered. Tiny pieces of glass sparkled around his knees. My father was trying to gather the mess with his bare hands. On my velvet sofa, my husband's mother, Susan, sat with her ankles crossed, eating grapes from a crystal bowl I had bought in Santa Fe. Beside her, my sister, in-law Heather, leaned back with a cruel little smile, as if my father's humiliation was her afternoon entertainment. "Make sure you scrub it properly, Norman," Heather said. "Chloe gets so dramatic when her house smells like a farm." Susan laughed. "I told Kyle this would happen," she said. "His father keeps showing up with these little country gifts, and the whole place ends up smelling like a roadside diner. We do not need vegetables and jars of mystery sauce in a house like this." I stood frozen in the foyer. "My name is Chloe Bennett. I was 36 years old then. I worked as a senior project director for a technology logistics company, and I had just returned from Salt Lake City after closing the biggest contract of my career. I had been gone almost a month. I was supposed to be gone for 2. The deal finished early, so I caught the first flight home. I imagined surprising my husband, Kyle. I imagined him spinning me around in the kitchen, laughing, asking why I did not tell him I was coming back. Instead, I came home to find my father treated like a servant in a house I paid for. But in that moment, watching my father's shoulders shake while my in-laws mocked him, something inside me went still. Heather finally looked toward the doorway. Her grape stopped halfway to her mouth. Susan followed her eyes. The color drained from her face. "Chloe?" she whispered, clutching her necklace. "You are home already." I ignored her. I walked straight to my father and crouched beside him. "Dad," I said softly. "Stand up." He lifted his face, and the shame in his eyes nearly broke me. This was the man who had taught me to ride a bike on a gravel road. The man who packed my lunches when my mother was sick. The man who sat in the parking lot during my first college interview because he was too nervous to drive away until he saw me smile. Now he looked frightened in my living room. "My girl," he said, forcing a weak smile. "I did not know you would be home." "Dad, why are you cleaning my floor on your knees?" "It was my fault," he said quickly. Too quickly. I dropped the basket. "I made a mess." "That does not answer my question." I turned to Susan and Heather. "Did neither one of you think to hand him a mop? Or help him? Or at least tell him to stop before he cut himself on glass?" Heather rolled her eyes, trying to recover her usual attitude. "Oh, Chloe, please." He spilled it. He wanted to clean it. Nobody forced him. I stood slowly. My voice came out calm, but I could feel anger burning behind every word. "Do not lie to me in my own house." Susan straightened. Her lips tightened in that wounded expression she used whenever she wanted to be the victim. "You are being very unfair." Your father arrived looking confused and upset. He said he needed to speak to Kyle immediately. Then he dropped the basket and started cleaning. We simply stayed out of his way, Di. "Where is Kyle?" The question changed the air in the room. Susan looked at Heather. Heather looked away. "He went out," Susan said. "Something urgent." I reached for my phone. "Then I will call him." Before I could unlock the screen, my father grabbed my wrist. His fingers were cold. "No," he whispered. "Please, Chloe. Do not call him yet." I stared at him. "Dad, what is going on?" His eyes moved toward Susan and Heather, then back to me. "Can we talk somewhere private?" I led him down the hallway to the guest bedroom. He closed the door, locked it, and sat on the bed like his legs had finally given up. I stayed standing. "Dad," I said, "tell me the truth." He rubbed both hands over his face. "First you tell me something. Are you safe? Les? Are you in trouble with the law?" I actually took a step back. "What?" His voice broke. "Kyle said you were." The room seemed to tilt. Kyle said what? My father reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a folded paper, wrinkled and damp from his hand. He held it out to me, but he could not look at me while I opened it. "Kyle called me last week," he said. "He said something had happened during your business trip. He said you were being investigated for moving company money. He said the company froze your accounts. He said if we did not raise $3 million fast, they would hand your case over to federal prosecutors and you could go to prison." For a moment, I heard nothing except the blood rushing in my ears. I looked down at the paper. It was a notarized power of attorney. My father had given Kyle authority to mortgage his farmhouse and the land around it, the home my mother had died in, the land my grandfather had worked, the porch where my father still drank coffee every morning and talked to my mother's memory. "Dad," I whispered, "did you sign this?" He nodded, and tears filled his eyes. "Kyle said it was the only way to save you. He told me not to call you. He said if I reached out, I could make things worse. He said you were scared and ashamed. He said you begged him to handle it quietly." My knees weakened. I sat down beside him, still holding the paper. "Dad, there is no investigation." I closed the contract early. I flew home because everything went well. My father covered his mouth with one trembling hand. "Oh, Lord. I lied to you. I thought I was saving you." I took his hand. "You acted out of love. He acted out of greed." That was the first time I said the word out loud, greed. Cold, careful, ugly greed. Kyle had not only allowed his mother and sister to treat my father like dirt, he had built a lie around my father's greatest fear and used it to steal the only thing the old man had left. "When does the money move?" I asked. My father swallowed. "Today." He said the bank would release it today. "How much?" $3 million. The number landed between us like a gunshot. $3 million. If I called Kyle right then, he would know I had found out. He could move the money, disappear, claim confusion, blame my father, blame me, blame anyone but himself. So I stood, folded the document, and put it in my purse. "Dad, listen carefully." He looked up at me. "You are going to leave this house right now. You are going back to Nebraska. You will not tell Susan, Heather, or Kyle that I know anything. If Kyle calls you, you will sound worried and confused like before. Can you do that?" He nodded slowly. "What are you going to do?" I looked at myself in the mirror above the dresser. My eyes were red. My face was pale. But beneath the shock, something stronger was taking shape. I am going to let Kyle believe he is still winning. When we walked back into the living room, Susan and Heather pretended to watch television. I called a taxi. I walked my father to the front door. Before he stepped outside, I hugged him so tightly I felt him shudder. "Trust me?" I whispered. "I do," he said. After the taxi drove away, I went back inside. Susan tilted her head. "Your father left very quickly. Poor man. He seemed so shaken." I met her eyes. I said, "He has been through a lot." Heather smirked. "Well, maybe next time he'll be more careful with his little basket." I smiled at her. Not because she was funny, because she had no idea what was coming. I waited exactly 20 minutes before I called Kyle. Long enough for my father's taxi to get away from the house. Long enough for my voice to become steady. Kyle answered on the 5th ring. "Hey, love," he said, sweet as syrup. "Everything okay in Salt Lake?" "I am home," I said. Silence. Then I heard the sharp sound of traffic, the squeal of brakes, and Kyle muttering something under his breath. "Home," he asked. "A's in Scottsdale home?" "Yes. I finished early though," he said. "Wow, that is amazing." "I wish you had told me. I wanted to surprise you." "You did?" There was another pause. I could almost hear him thinking. Was my father still there? Had he told me? Had I seen the document? Did I know about the money? I gave him the answer he wanted. "Kyle, I need your help." His voice changed immediately. "With what?" I walked into my office, shut the door, and sat behind my desk. "This has to stay between us," I said. "Do not tell your mother or Heather." "Not yet. What is going on?" I lowered my voice. The Salt Lake project opened a door, a big one. Why land deal? "There is a confidential expansion plan," I said. "My company is considering a massive data center and logistics campus in southern Idaho. The announcement has not been made. Once it is public, land in the target zone will explode in value." He breathed in. "Are you sure? I saw the planning documents myself. Can we buy?" "I cannot. Not directly. Senior leadership is under audit because of the size of the contract. If I make a purchase now, it will look like insider trading, but you are not employed by my company." His voice dropped lower. "How much would we need?" "There is a developer I know from college. Her name is Rachel Porter. She owns 5 parcels in the area. She is overextended after a failed project and needs cash. She will sell all 5 for $6 million. $6 million? Yes. But if we get them now and the project goes public, those parcels could be worth $18 million, maybe more." But the silence that followed was not shock, it was hunger. "I might be able to get 3, he said carefully. 3. He said it as though it was his money, as though he had earned it, as though it had not been squeezed out of my father's fear. I let my voice tremble with excitement. "Kyle, that would be perfect. Buy whatever you can. We can figure out the rest later." "You really think this could work?" "I think this is the kind of chance people wait their whole lives for." That was true. Just not in the way he thought. "Send me Rachel's information," he said. "I will. But Kyle, yeah, no one can know this came from me. If anyone asks, you found the deal yourself." He gave a small laugh. "Do not worry, Chloe. I know how to handle business." I almost laughed too. Instead, I ended the call and messaged Rachel. Rachel and I had met freshman year at Arizona State. She was brilliant, blunt, and allergic to men who thought confidence was the same thing as intelligence. She now worked in commercial real estate, and she really did own 5 parcels in Idaho. But they were not gold mines. They were dead weight. The land sat outside a half-abandoned industrial zone where permits had been frozen for years. No roads, no water lines, no committed project, no serious buyers. Rachel had been trying to unload the parcels for months. When I told her what Kyle had done to my father, she did not ask if I was sure. She said, "Tell me what you need." I told her everything. That afternoon, Kyle went to Rachel's office in a navy suit I had paid for. Rachel later told me he walked in smiling like a man who expected everyone to stand when he entered. "I am Kyle Bennett," he announced, "Chloe's husband." Rachel shook his hand and kept her face neutral. "I know who you are. Sit down." Rachel played her role perfectly. "I do not have time for games," she told him. 5 parcels. 6 million total. I would rather sell all 5 together, but if you can only fund part today, we can structure an option for the rest. You have 24 hours. Kyle barely skimmed the documents. He asked no serious questions. He did not call an attorney. He did not call a county planning office. He did not even ask why, if the parcels were about to triple in value, Rachel would sell them so fast. He wrote the check using the 3 million stolen from my father. With that money, he purchased 2 parcels outright and put a deposit on the other 3. That evening, he came home late. I was in the kitchen making tea. Susan and Heather were at the breakfast table, whispering until they saw him. Kyle's face was flushed with excitement. He kissed my cheek too quickly. "Long day," he said. "I can tell." He would not meet my eyes. That was when the second part of his downfall began. He had 3 million in the deal, but he needed 3 million more to finish the purchase. The fantasy of 18 million had already swallowed him whole. At midnight, I heard voices from Susan's bedroom. I walked quietly down the hallway and stopped outside the half-open door. Kyle was inside with his mother and Heather. "I need you both to listen," he said. "This is important, and Chloe cannot know." My fingers curled against the wall. Susan sounded worried. "What have you done?" "I found an investment. A real one. Chloe knows about it, but she cannot touch it because of her company audit. I already put in 3 million, and I need another 3 within 5 days. Heather snorted. "Where are you going to get that?" Kyle lowered his voice. "The Nebraska house," Susan gasped. "Our family house." "Les, that house was your father's. Your grandparents lived there. We cannot just sell it in 5 days. Kyle's voice became smooth and persuasive. "Mom, listen to me. That house is old. It needs repairs. You complain about Nebraska every time you visit. If we sell it now, I can turn that money into millions. I will buy you a better house. A bigger house. You will never have to depend on Chloe again." There it was. The wound he knew how to touch. Susan hated accepting help from me. She loved my guest room, my kitchen, my credit card, my private doctor referrals, but she hated that everyone knew the money came from me. Kyle offered her the one thing she wanted more than comfort: pride. Heather spoke next. "Honestly, Mom, Kyle is right. Chloe has been acting like queen of the universe for years. Let Kyle make real money for once." Susan was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "What if it fails?" Kyle laughed. "It cannot fail." I closed my eyes. People say revenge is about anger. Sometimes it is about patience. It is standing outside a door, listening to people sell their own dignity, and letting them finish the deal themselves. 2 days later, Susan and Heather flew to Nebraska. They told me they were visiting a cousin. In truth, they pressured the sale of their old family property at a painful discount so Kyle could get the money before his option expired. They signed away a house that had belonged to their family for generations, not because anyone tricked them, but because Kyle promised them a throne. When the 3 million arrived, Kyle ran straight back to Rachel. He bought the remaining parcels. All 5 lots became his. Rachel called me that evening. "He signed everything," she said. "Did he review the zoning history? No. Did he ask for projections? No. Did he bring counsel?" Rachel laughed once. "He brought sunglasses. I sat at my desk and covered my mouth. Not because I was amused. Because after days of holding myself together, I was finally afraid of how deep the rot went. He paid the full 6 million, Rachel said. I took the legitimate land value, cleared my debt, took the agreed commission, and wired the remaining funds into the escrow account your attorney set up. Thank you, Chloe. Yes. Your husband is either the most careless man I have ever met or the most arrogant. He is both. For the next 4 days, I lived in my own house like an actress on a stage. Kyle came home every night wearing a smile that did not belong to him. He moved through the rooms with new confidence, as if my furniture, my floors, and my life had already transferred into his name. Susan became crueler by the hour. The next morning, I met with my attorney, Marlene Grant, in her office downtown. Marlene was in her 50s, with silver hair cut to her chin and a voice so calm it made guilty people nervous. She reviewed every document I placed on her table. Marlene read silently for almost 10 minutes. Then she removed her glasses. "This is ugly," she said. "Can we get my father's house back? Yes? But we need to move carefully. We can pay off or challenge the loan, depending on how the funds were moved. But if our immediate goal is to protect your father, we should freeze what we can, settle what we must, and document Kyle's liability. What about criminal charges? We can prepare a fraud complaint. Whether the prosecutor files charges is their decision. But the evidence is strong." I nodded. "What about divorce?" Marlene's mouth tightened. "I was hoping you would ask." "Do not confront him alone," Marlene warned. "I already live with him." "Then keep your phone close. If he becomes aggressive, leave immediately. Men who lose control of money sometimes try to regain control another way." I understood what she meant. That night, Kyle announced a family celebration. He walked into the kitchen holding a leather folder, wearing the same smug expression he had worn in our wedding photos when people praised him for marrying such an accomplished woman. Back then, I thought that smile meant pride in me. Now I knew it was possession. "Family," he said. "We are about to enter a new chapter." Susan clapped her hands. Heather opened champagne. I stood at the kitchen island with my arms crossed. "What are we celebrating?" Kyle smiled at me. "The end of living in your shadow." The room went quiet. He had not meant to say it so plainly. But champagne and greed loosened the tongue. Susan did not correct him. Heather did not look ashamed. They both watched me, waiting for me to shrink. I did not. Kyle poured champagne into 4 glasses. I did not touch mine. "To the future?" Heather said. "To real success," Susan added. Kyle lifted his glass. "It is time this family had a real provider." My phone rang. I glanced at the screen. "Marlene," I answered and placed it on speaker. "Hi, Marlene. You are on speaker." Her voice filled the kitchen, crisp and controlled. "Chloe, I have confirmed the bank appointment for tomorrow at 10. We can begin the process of clearing your father's deed, and we will file the formal fraud complaint against Kyle Bennett after the signed acknowledgement is complete." Kyle's glass froze in midair. Heather's smile vanished. Susan lowered her champagne slowly. Marlene continued. "I also reviewed the Idaho land purchase. It is valid, but it does nothing to affect Kyle's liability for the funds obtained from your father under false pretenses." Oh, Kyle set his glass down so hard champagne splashed over his fingers. "What is this?" he demanded. I thanked Marlene and ended the call. Then I looked at my husband. That was my attorney. His jaw tightened. "Why are you talking to an attorney?" "Because my father told me what you did." Susan looked from Kyle to me. "What is she talking about?" I opened my purse and placed the folded power of attorney on the counter. Kyle stared at it. For the first time since I met him, I saw real fear on his face. "You should have stayed in Salt Lake," he said. The sentence was soft, but everyone heard it. Susan covered her mouth. Heather whispered, "Kyle," I leaned forward. "And you should have chosen a victim who did not raise me." Kyle tried to laugh. It came out broken. "Chloe, this is a misunderstanding. Your father was confused. He knew you needed help. My father thought I was going to prison because you told him I was. I was trying to protect you from a fake crime you invented." Susan pushed back from the table. "Kyle, tell me this is not true." He turned on her so fast she flinched. "Do not act innocent. You wanted the money as much as I did." Heather stood. "What? The $3 million you said came from a private investor. Was that her father's house?" Kyle said nothing. His silence answered for him. Heather's face turned red. "You made us sell the Nebraska house." "I made you?" Kyle snapped. "You were counting bedrooms in the imaginary mansion before the papers were even signed." Susan began to cry. At first, I thought maybe shame had finally found her. Then she said, "What will people think of us?" That was when I knew. Even then, she was not crying for my father. She was crying for herself. Kyle pointed at me. "You sent me, oh no!" I said, "I gave you information. You chose greed. You chose stolen money. You chose not to read a single document. Rachel lied. Rachel sold you legal land. Real land. Land you now own. It is worthless. You should have checked." His face twisted. "You are my wife? And you told my father I was under federal investigation?" I was going to pay him back. With what? Imaginary profit from imaginary investors. I would have made it work. That is what every thief says when the plan fails. He stepped toward me. I did not move, but I picked up my phone and held it where he could see the screen. Marlene has copies of everything. My father's statement, the messages, the bank records. If you come closer, I call 911 first and Marlene second. Kyle stopped. The man in front of me looked nothing like the man I married. I used to think Kyle was insecure but kind, frustrated but loving, a little proud, maybe, but not dangerous. Now I understood that insecurity can become cruelty when it finds someone patient enough to carry it. He lowered his voice. "What do you want?" "Tomorrow morning, you will come to the bank. You will sign an acknowledgement that the debt came from funds obtained from my father through deception. You will cooperate in clearing his deed. You expect me to just sign whatever you put in front of me? No. I expect you to bring a lawyer if you have one. But the documents are ready, and the evidence is stronger than your denial. Susan wiped her face. And what happens to us? I turned to her. You leave my house. Her eyes widened. All of us? Yes. Chloe, be reasonable. I have health problems. I paid for your medication while you watched my father scrub stew off my floor. She flinched. Heather tried next. We'll have nowhere to go. You have Kyle. You have each other. And apparently you have 5 exciting parcels of land in Idaho. That is cruel, she said. I stared at her. No, Heather. Cruel is eating grapes while an old man bleeds from broken glass and calling him a farm smell. Her mouth opened, then closed. No answer. Because there was no answer. Kyle dragged both hands through his hair. This will ruin me. You ruined yourself. I am only turning on the lights. He looked at me with hatred then. Pure hatred. It should have frightened me, but all it did was confirm that I was finally seeing him clearly. The next morning, I arrived at the bank with Marlene and my father. Dad wore his best shirt, the pale blue one he saved for church and doctor visits. He looked smaller than usual under the bright lobby lights, but when I took his hand, his grip was steady. I am sorry, he whispered. I shook my head. Do not apologize again. But I signed. You believed you were saving me. His eyes filled. A father should know better. A father should not have to defend himself from his daughter's husband. Kyle arrived 10 minutes late. He looked as if he had not slept. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes were red, and for once, he did not carry himself like the smartest man in the room. A young attorney came with him. The attorney looked through the documents, asked several careful questions, then took Kyle aside. They spoke in low voices near a window. Kyle's face tightened. His attorney returned. My client will sign the acknowledgement of debt without admitting criminal intent, he said. Marlene smiled politely. Your client can word his feelings in a diary. The documents will state the facts. For the first time that day, my father almost smiled. It took 3 hours. 3 hours of signatures, account confirmations, releases, notarized forms, and phone calls. I used the recovered funds from Rachel's sale escrow to clear what needed to be cleared. Kyle signed an enforceable debt agreement. If he ever sold those parcels, if he ever received profit from them, if he ever tried to hide the assets, he would owe every cent back. More importantly, the farmhouse was safe. When the bank representative handed my father the release certificate, his hands shook so hard I took the paper from him and held it between us. It is yours, I said. It is still yours. He pressed his forehead to mine. My girl, he whispered. Across the table, Kyle stared at the floor. Not once did he say he was sorry. That used to hurt me. I used to think apologies mattered because they meant a person understood the pain they caused. Now I know some people avoid apologies because apologies would force them to admit there is something broken inside them. That afternoon, I filed for divorce. The next day, I changed the locks. Kyle, Susan, and Heather moved out before the weekend. They took clothes, jewelry, some furniture Susan claimed was family property, and a ridiculous number of decorative pillows Heather had always mocked until she realized she would have to buy her own. When the door closed behind them for the last time, the house felt strange. Not empty. Clean. For the first time in years, I could hear silence without waiting for criticism to fill it. Divorce is not dramatic every day. Some days it is paperwork. Some days it is passwords. Some days it is sitting at your kitchen table, canceling joint accounts and realizing how many small ways your life had been tied to someone who never truly loved you as much as he loved what you provided. Kyle tried to fight it first. Heather texted me 3 weeks after they moved out. My mother is sick from stress. You have more money than you need. The least you could do is help us after everything. I read the message once. Then again. I remembered my father kneeling in my living room, his hands shaking over broken glass. I remembered Heather's voice saying, maybe next time he will be more careful with his little basket. I typed one reply. My father had sore knees, cut fingers, and humiliation in my living room. You had grapes, a sofa, and plenty of time to help him. Do not contact me again. Then I blocked her. As for me, I went back to Nebraska. Not forever, just often enough to remember who I was before my marriage taught me to shrink politely inside my own life. I paid to renovate my father's farmhouse, but I was careful not to erase it. I did not want it turned into some glossy showpiece that belonged in a magazine. I wanted it safe, warm, solid, new roof, updated wiring, a ramp by the back porch so Dad's knees would not ache on the steps, a better heating system for winter, a restored kitchen with the same old wooden table where my mother used to roll pie crust. When the work was finished, Dad walked through the house slowly, touching the walls as if greeting old friends. You did too much, he said. No, Kyle almost took too much. I put back what I could. He stopped in the doorway of the living room. On the mantel sat a photo of my mother in a yellow dress, smiling at something outside the frame. Dad took off his cap. She would have been proud of you. I swallowed hard. I hope so. She would also have wanted to hit Kyle with a frying pan. I laughed so suddenly that I started crying. Dad laughed too, and for the first time since the day I came home early, the sound felt easy. That evening, we sat on the back porch with coffee. The field stretched golden under the setting sun. Crickets started singing in the grass, and the air smelled like soil, wood smoke, and the peach trees behind the barn. My father broke the silence. Chloe. Yes. Did I embarrass you that day? The question hurt more than I expected. I turned to him. Dad, no. He looked at his coffee. I was on my knees in your house. You were trying to clean a mess you did not deserve to clean. I should have stood up. I took his hand. You thought your daughter was in danger. Kyle used that against you. That is not weakness. He stared out at the fields. What is weakness then? I thought of Kyle's face when the truth closed around him. I thought of Susan crying because people might judge her. I thought of Heather begging for money while still seeing herself as the injured one. Weakness is hurting someone who trusts you and calling it survival. Dad nodded slowly. And strength. Strength is getting back up without becoming like the people who pushed you down. He looked at me then, and his eyes were wet but peaceful. A year later, the divorce was final. I kept my house. Kyle kept the Idaho parcels. The court recognized his debt. The fraud complaint did not vanish, and while I will not pretend every consequence arrived like thunder, his life changed in ways money could not easily repair. Employers asked questions. Friends disappeared. The image he had worked so hard to build cracked open. People can survive losing money. They have a much harder time surviving the truth. The last time I saw Kyle was outside the courthouse. He looked older, thinner, and angrier. For a moment, he seemed like he wanted to say something important. An apology, maybe? A curse, more likely. Instead, he said, "You really enjoyed destroying me, didn't you?" I looked at him for a long second. No, Kyle. I enjoyed saving my father. Destroying you was just the part you handled yourself. I walked away before he could answer. That night, I slept better than I had in years. Not because revenge made me happy. Revenge is not happiness. Justice does not erase the pain or give back the years you spent making excuses for someone. But justice can open a locked door inside you. It can remind you that your life is still yours. I do not regret what I did. I regret waiting so long to believe what disrespect was trying to show me. For years, I thought being strong meant enduring. I thought it meant paying the bills, keeping the peace, smiling through insults, and swallowing every small humiliation so nobody could accuse me of being difficult. But peace that requires you to betray yourself is not peace. It is a beautiful prison. The day I came home early, I thought I lost my marriage. In truth, I found the door. My father still lives in the farmhouse in Nebraska. Every Sunday evening, he sits on the porch beside my mother's picture, drinks coffee, and calls me to tell me about the weather, the crops, or the neighbor's dog stealing socks from the laundry line. Sometimes he mails me jars of peach preserves wrapped in newspaper. The first time one arrived at my house after everything happened, I stood in my kitchen holding it for a long time. Then I opened it, spread it on toast, and let myself cry. It smelled like summer. It smelled like home. It smelled like the man who loved me enough to risk everything because he believed I needed saving. Now, whenever someone visits my house, they see a framed photo in the entryway. It is not a wedding portrait. It is not an award from work. It is a picture of my father standing in front of his farmhouse, one hand on the porch rail, smiling like a man who knows the ground beneath him is his own. People sometimes ask why that photo is the first thing I want guests to see. I tell them the truth because anyone who enters my home should understand one rule before they take another step. No one kneels there unless they are praying, planting flowers, or helping someone rise. And if anyone ever mistakes kindness for weakness again, I will make sure they learn the difference before they reach the door. A house is not truly yours because your name is on the deed. It is yours when everyone inside it knows that love will be protected, dignity will be defended, and no good father will ever be left on his knees.